I never thought I'd be posting here, but I don't know where else to turn. My name's Mike, and I've been married to Sarah for 10 years. We've had a pretty solid relationship, or at least I thought we did. Things started feeling off about 6 months ago, and now, well, I'm beginning to realize I've been blind to a lot of things. Sarah and I met back in college. I was your average engineering major, and she was this confident, outspoken girl studying psychology. We hit it off right away, and I felt like the luckiest guy. We got married a few years after graduation and have 2 kids, Emily, 8, and Jason, 5. Life was normal. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but overall I thought we were happy. At least I was. But lately things have been different. Sarah started working out a lot more, which I didn't think much of at first. I figured she was just trying to stay healthy. Then came the late nights. She joined this girls' book club, which meets on Fridays. Normally, I wouldn't have blinked twice, but she was suddenly way more interested in how she looked when she left the house. Makeup, new clothes, the works. It was strange, but I didn't want to seem controlling, so I never said anything. A few weeks ago, I noticed she'd become a lot more secretive with her phone. We always used to leave our phones lying around the house, no big deal, but now she takes hers with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. I'm not proud of it, but I started to feel paranoid. I caught myself wondering who she was texting all the time. I'd hear her phone buzz in the middle of the night, and she'd claim it was just a notification from some random app. I wanted to believe her, but something about it didn't sit right with me. The real tipping point came last week when I noticed something that shook me to my core. It was late, maybe around 11 p.m., and she had just come home from her book club. I kissed her on the cheek as she came in, but when she walked past me, I caught the unmistakable scent of men's cologne, the kind I don't wear. I asked her about it casually, and she laughed it off, saying one of the girls must have hugged her, and their boyfriend's cologne rubbed off. I didn't push it, but that's when my doubts really started creeping in. I feel crazy, like I'm making this stuff up in my head. But deep down I know something's wrong. I don't want to confront her until I have more proof, but I have no idea where to even begin. What would you do if you were in my shoes? So, after posting here last time, I took some of your advice. I decided to keep my cool and look for actual proof before confronting Sarah. The last thing I wanted was to accuse her of something without solid evidence and completely blow up our marriage if I was wrong. A couple of days after I first posted, I found my chance. Sarah left her phone charging in the kitchen while she was in the shower. Normally, like I said, she never leaves it out of her sight anymore, but this time, she must have forgotten. My heart was pounding as I stared at the phone, debating with myself whether to pick it up. I knew invading her privacy like this wasn't right, but at that moment I just needed answers. I unlocked her phone. We still had the same passcodes. She hadn't changed hers, which felt like a small relief. I went straight to her messages, feeling like my hands were shaking the entire time. At first, there was nothing strange. Messages from her friends, work stuff, and some family chats. I was about to give up when I saw a thread with someone named Lily. I don't remember her mentioning a Lily before, so I opened it. And there it was. Lily wasn't a Lily at all. It was some guy named Brandon. He'd saved her under a fake name, probably thinking I'd never notice. The messages weren't full of anything blatantly incriminating. No "I love yous" or anything like that. But there were flirty exchanges, late-night meet-up plans, and mentions of their book club. It was clear that Sarah and Brandon were seeing each other. I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I couldn't even read the messages properly. My mind was racing. Every worst-case scenario I'd been trying to push out of my head came crashing in. This wasn't just my imagination. Sarah was cheating on me. And it wasn't just emotional either. Some of the messages were pretty graphic. They talked about being together last Friday, after her so-called book club. The same Friday, when she came home smelling like someone else's cologne. I put her phone down and tried to compose myself. I felt sick, angry, betrayed. But more than anything, I was confused. How could she do this to me? To our family? I knew I couldn't just confront her then and there. I needed more time to figure out what to do next. I needed a plan. For now, I decided to act normal, even though every time I looked at her, I could feel the weight of her lies crushing me. After finding those messages, I felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time I looked at Sarah, it was like I was seeing someone I didn't know anymore. I couldn't shake the thought of her with Brandon. The worst part? I had to keep pretending like nothing was wrong, all while my mind was spinning. I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to figure out my next move. I started paying even more attention to her behavior, looking for any small signs that would confirm what I already knew. And it didn't take long. Last Saturday, Sarah told me she was going out for coffee with some of her girlfriends from the book club. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but now I was suspicious of everything. So I decided to follow her. Yeah, I know it sounds extreme, but I had to know for sure what was going on. I couldn't confront her without undeniable proof. She left the house around 10 a.m., and I waited about 5 minutes before grabbing my car keys and heading out. I didn't want to follow too closely, so I kept a safe distance, just enough to keep her in my line of sight. My heart was pounding the whole time, and I kept telling myself I'd turn around if it turned out she was actually going to meet her friends. But I had a bad feeling about this. Sure enough, she didn't head toward any coffee shop I knew of. Instead, she drove across town to a small, out-of-the-way motel. I parked a couple of blocks away and watched as she got out of the car. My stomach dropped when I saw Brandon, yes, that Brandon, waiting for her outside. They hugged, and it wasn't the kind of hug you give a friend. It was intimate, too close, too familiar. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife, sneaking around in broad daylight with this guy. They walked inside together, and I just sat there in my car, staring at the motel entrance, wondering how the hell I ended up here. My first instinct was to barge in there, confront them both right on the spot, but something stopped me. I don't know if it was fear or shock, but I just couldn't do it. I drove home, feeling like I was on autopilot. When Sarah came back a couple of hours later, she acted completely normal, like she hadn't just been off with another man. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted to go out for lunch. I went along with it, forcing myself to smile, nod, and make small talk. The whole time I wanted to scream, but I knew I had to play it cool until I figured out my next move. Now I've got no doubt she's cheating. But how do I confront her? What do I even say? I'm scared of what comes next. Any advice? I'm really lost here. I knew I couldn't keep pretending forever. The more I thought about Sarah's betrayal, the more it consumed me. Every time she smiled at me or asked how my day was, I felt like I was watching a stranger. I needed to confront her, but I didn't want her to wriggle out of it with excuses or lies. I wanted the truth, and I was determined to get it. After seeing her with Brandon at the motel, there was no denying what was going on. I didn't want to explode in anger and turn it into a massive fight, so I decided to plan the confrontation carefully. I waited until our kids were at my parents' house for the weekend. I knew it would be a rough conversation, and I didn't want them around to see any of it. That Saturday evening, after the kids were gone, I sat Sarah down in the living room. My heart was pounding, but I tried to keep my voice calm. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, looking her straight in the eye. I could see her tense up a little, but she didn't say anything right away. I took a deep breath and continued. "I know you've been seeing someone else. I know about Brandon." Her face went pale for a moment, and she quickly tried to compose herself. What are you talking about, Mike?" she asked, her voice shaky, but still trying to act innocent. I didn't let her play dumb. "I followed you to the motel," I said quietly. "I saw you with him. You can stop lying now." For a split second, I saw the panic in her eyes before she shifted into defense mode. "Oh my God, Mike, are you serious? You followed me? That's crazy. You're being paranoid. He's just a friend." I almost laughed at how predictable her response was. "A friend? Do you think I'm stupid? I saw the way you hugged him, Sarah. I know you're not going to a book club with your friends. Just tell me the truth." At that point, she knew she was cornered, but instead of admitting it, she got angry. "You're spying on me now? Is that what our marriage has come to?" No wonder I feel suffocated. You've been controlling and obsessed with this for months. Her words hit me hard, but I wasn't going to let her flip this on me. This isn't about me, Sarah. This is about you cheating on me. You can twist it however you want, but I know what I saw. She stood up and started pacing the room, avoiding eye contact. Fine. Yes, okay? I've been seeing Brandon, but it's not what you think. It's not serious. I was just, I don't know, looking for something I wasn't getting here. That last sentence stung like hell. All the anger I'd been holding back came rushing up, but I managed to keep my voice steady. So, what now? You've been sneaking around with him behind my back. What do you want from me? Do you want a divorce? Are you leaving me for him? She stopped pacing and looked at me, her eyes filled with frustration. I don't know, Mike. I'm confused. I didn't plan for this to happen, okay? I don't know what I want anymore. Her words were like a knife twisting in my chest. The woman I had loved for over a decade was standing in front of me, admitting to an affair, but acting like she had no idea what she wanted. It felt like I was losing everything. And the worst part was, I didn't even know what to do next. Fine, I said, my voice flat. You figure out what you want, but you can't keep doing this to me. I deserve better than to be strung along while you mess around with someone else. And with that, I walked out of the room. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living in denial anymore. After our confrontation, I felt completely drained. I had pictured that moment 1,000 times in my head, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. I walked out of the living room, leaving Sarah standing there, and headed to the bedroom. I needed space to think, to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. That night, she didn't come to bed. I stayed up late, lying there in the dark, waiting to hear her footsteps. But they never came. Part of me was relieved. I didn't know how I'd handle being next to her after everything that had just happened. My mind was racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just physical, or was she falling for this guy? And why hadn't she been honest with me if she was unhappy? The next morning, things were awkward. No surprise there. We barely spoke to each other. She stayed quiet, avoiding eye contact, and I didn't push her. There was so much to say, but we were both tiptoeing around it. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. Later that afternoon, she came to me, looking more worn out than I'd ever seen her. She sat down on the edge of the bed, fidgeting with her hands. Mike, she started, her voice softer now. I'm sorry. I don't know what got into me. I never meant for it to get this far. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't know if I believed her apology. Was she sorry for what she did, or just sorry that she got caught? Why, Sarah? I finally asked, my voice quieter than I expected. Why did you do this? Was I really that bad of a husband? Why didn't you just talk to me? She looked at me, tears in her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. I guess. I felt lost. Our marriage hasn't been the same for a while, and I just didn't know how to fix it. Brandon, he just made me feel wanted again. I'm sorry, Mike. I really am. Hearing her say that broke something in me. I had always tried to be there for her, to be a good husband and father, and now she was telling me that wasn't enough. I didn't know whether to be angry or just sad. I deserved to know how you were feeling, I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. You could have told me instead of sneaking around with him. I know, she replied, wiping away her tears. I just didn't know how. I've been so confused. I didn't know what to say after that. I felt numb. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to find a way to fix our marriage for the sake of our kids. But another part of me, a bigger part, couldn't shake the betrayal. We can't go on like this, I finally said. You need to figure out what you want. If you want to be with him, then, I guess that's that. But if you want to stay, we need to get help. We can't just pretend this didn't happen. She nodded, but she didn't say anything. I could tell she didn't have the answers yet, and I wasn't sure if I had the patience to wait for them. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that nothing would ever be the same between us again. And so, we're in this weird limbo. She hasn't reached out to Brandon, at least not that I know of. But the distance between us feels like a canyon. I've been sleeping in the guest room, and we're both just existing in the same house, barely speaking, waiting for something to give. The days after our conversation felt like we were stuck in some kind of awkward limbo. Sarah and I were living under the same roof, but we were hardly interacting. Every once in a while, we'd make small talk mostly about the kids, but other than that, there was just silence. It felt like we were roommates, not husband and wife. I thought I'd feel angry all the time, but instead, what surprised me most was the guilt that started creeping in. I kept replaying everything she said about feeling lost and not knowing how to fix our marriage. Was this partly my fault? Had I been too distant, too focused on work, on the kids, on everything but her? I couldn't stop thinking about the nights I came home late, too tired to do anything but crash on the couch. The times I turned down her invitations to go out because I just wanted to relax. Maybe I hadn't been making her feel wanted either. I hated that I was even thinking like this. But it's hard not to when your wife tells you she cheated because she felt lost. One evening, about a week after our talk, I was sitting in the guest room when Sarah knocked on the door. I could tell she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she looked exhausted. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, not really sure where this conversation was going to lead. She sat down on the edge of the bed, taking a deep breath before she spoke. "I don't know what's going to happen with us, Mike," she said softly. "But I just need you to know how sorry I am. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have let things get this far with Brandon." I listened, trying to process what she was saying. She wasn't defending her actions this time. She wasn't blaming me or trying to shift the responsibility. She was just apologizing. "I know I hurt you," she continued. "I hate myself for it. I never wanted to betray you like this. You're a good man and you didn't deserve any of this." For the first time since this whole thing started, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. And for a second, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to fix this. But the pain of what she did was still so fresh. I couldn't just forgive her and move on like nothing happened. "I appreciate that you're sorry," I said quietly. "But you need to understand this isn't something we can just sweep under the rug. You broke my trust, Sarah. And I don't know if we'll ever get that back." She nodded, wiping away her tears. "I know," she whispered. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to try and make things right. Counseling, whatever you need. I don't want to lose you, Mike." Hearing that made my heart ache. There was a part of me that wanted to believe her, to take her hand and say, "Okay, let's fix this." But another part of me, the part that had been shattered by her betrayal, wasn't sure if I could ever truly trust her again. "I don't know if I can trust you," I finally said. "You say you're sorry, but how do I know you won't do this again? How do I know this isn't just another lie?" She didn't have an answer for that, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. She just looked at me, the weight of her actions clearly sinking in. After a long silence, she stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That night, I lay awake, torn between wanting to rebuild what we had and knowing that it might be impossible. The guilt of wondering if I had contributed to her affair wouldn't leave me alone. But deep down, I knew this wasn't all on me. She made a choice that destroyed the trust we built over a decade. And no matter how sorry she was, I didn't know if that trust could ever be repaired. But now the question was, did I even want to try? A few more days passed, and things hadn't really changed between us. We were still tiptoeing around each other, pretending everything was normal for the kids, but completely broken underneath. I kept telling myself I needed more time to think, to figure out if this marriage was even worth saving. But the truth was I didn't know what I wanted. Then something happened that shook me to my core and made me question everything all over again. It was Friday night, and I was sitting in the living room when Sarah came in holding her phone. She looked anxious, like she had something to say, but wasn't sure how to start. "What's up?" I asked, my guard immediately going up. She bit her lip and hesitated for a moment. I got a message from Brandon," she finally said, not meeting my eyes. I felt my stomach drop. "What did he say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He said he misses me, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. And he wants to see me? The room felt like it was spinning. Just when I thought we were starting to make some kind of progress, Brandon had to show up again, like a ghost haunting the last bit of hope I had for this marriage. And what did you tell him? I asked, already bracing myself for the worst. She looked at me, eyes filled with regret. I told him no. I told him I'm trying to fix things with you, and I can't see him anymore. Part of me felt relief, but there was another part, a much bigger part, that was furious. Furious that he was still in the picture at all. Furious that she had let it get to this point, and furious that I was even in this situation in the first place. You shouldn't even be talking to him, I said, standing up. How do you expect us to fix this if you're still in contact with him? I know, she said, her voice pleading. I didn't want to, but he messaged me out of the blue. I'm not going to respond anymore, I swear. I'll block him if that's what you need. I just stared at her, trying to figure out if I could believe her. She was saying all the right things, but words didn't mean much to me right now. Not after everything. Why didn't you block him already? I asked, the anger starting to creep into my voice. If you really wanted to fix this, why did you even open that message? I don't know, she said, her voice cracking. I was weak, okay? I'm trying, Mike, I really am. I want us to work, but I'm not perfect. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. I didn't know what to think anymore. On one hand, she was saying she wanted to make things right, but on the other, Brandon was still lurking in the background, tempting her to throw everything away again. Block him, I finally said. Now. She nodded quickly and pulled out her phone, showing me as she blocked his number. It should have made me feel better, but it didn't. The damage had already been done. She was still talking to him after everything, even if it was just a message. And the worst part? It made me wonder if she really wanted to be with me or if she was just staying out of guilt. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my head. Was she telling the truth? Was she really trying to make things right, or was she just saying what she thought I wanted to hear? I couldn't tell anymore. The doubt was eating me alive, and I didn't know how much longer I could take it. At this point, I was starting to wonder, should I even try to save this marriage? Or was it already too late? After Sarah blocked Brandon, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would start to calm down. But the truth is, the damage was already too deep. Even though she said she was committed to fixing our marriage, I couldn't shake the doubt that had taken root in my mind. The problem wasn't just her actions anymore. It was the fact that I didn't know if I could ever truly trust her again. A week later, the tension between us was thicker than ever. We barely spoke unless it was about the kids, and even then, it felt like we were just going through the motions. Every time she left the house, I wondered if she was really going where she said she was. Every time she checked her phone, I felt a stab of paranoia, wondering if she had found some other way to contact Brandon. I couldn't live like this, constantly second-guessing everything. It was driving me insane. One night after putting the kids to bed, I found myself pacing around the house, unable to sit still. I kept thinking about what my life had become, this constant, gnawing sense of betrayal, the distance between us, the way I no longer felt like I knew my own wife. I finally grabbed my keys and headed out for a drive, needing some space to clear my head. As I drove through the quiet streets, memories of Sarah and me flooded my mind. Our wedding day, the birth of our kids, the little moments that used to make us so happy. It felt like a different lifetime, like the person I married was long gone. I ended up parking by the lake, the same place we used to go on dates when we were younger. I sat there, staring out at the water, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. I wasn't perfect, but I had always tried to be a good husband. I worked hard, provided for our family, loved our kids. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. The thing that kept circling in my mind was, could I ever really forgive her? Even if she was genuinely sorry, even if she cut Brandon out of her life completely, could I ever get past what she had done? I sat there for what felt like hours, lost in thought. The truth hit me hard. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. And without trust, what was left? A hollow shell of a marriage, built on broken promises and lies. When I finally got home, Sarah was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked worried, like she knew something was coming. I wasn't sure how to start the conversation, but I knew I couldn't keep avoiding it. "We need to talk," I said, the words heavy in the air. She nodded, her eyes full of fear. "I know," she said quietly. "I've been waiting for this." I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that's happened. And I don't know if I can do this anymore, Sarah. I don't know if I can move past what you did." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Mike, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can to fix this." "I know you're sorry," I said, my voice softening. "But it's not just about being sorry. It's about trust. And right now, I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again." She started crying then, and for a moment I felt guilty for being so blunt. But I had to be honest. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay, when it clearly wasn't. "I don't want to lose you," she sobbed. "I love you, Mike. I love our family. Please, don't give up on us." I felt a lump in my throat. I still loved her too. That was the hardest part. But love didn't feel like enough anymore. Love wasn't going to magically fix the trust she had broken. "I don't want to lose you either," I said quietly. "But I don't know if we can come back from this." We sat there in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on us. There was no easy answer, no quick fix. I could see that she was hurting, and I knew she was genuinely sorry. But the damage had been done. "I think we need some time apart," I finally said, the words cutting through the silence. "I need to figure out what I want. And I think you do too." She didn't argue. She just nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Okay," she whispered, "if that's what you need." And just like that, we reached the breaking point. I wasn't sure if this was the end of our marriage, but I knew one thing for sure. We couldn't keep living like this. We needed space. We needed time. And maybe we needed to let go. After we agreed to take some time apart, the house felt even emptier than before. Sarah didn't move out, but we kept our distance, almost like we were living parallel lives under the same roof. We alternated who took the kids to school, who cooked dinner, and who stayed in the living room. When we crossed paths, there was a strained politeness, like we were avoiding anything that might set off an emotional explosion. It wasn't that I didn't care anymore. If anything, I cared too much. That's what made this limbo so unbearable. Every time I saw her, part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to pull her close and try to forget what happened. But then the memory of Brandon, of her betrayal, would hit me all over again, and I'd feel the distance growing even more. I thought taking space would make things clearer, but all it did was make me more confused. I decided to focus on the kids. Emily and Jason were the only things holding me together at this point. They were starting to pick up on the tension between us, asking why Mommy and Daddy didn't eat dinner together anymore, why I slept in the guest room. I hated lying to them, but I wasn't ready to explain everything yet. They were too young to understand. One afternoon, about 2 weeks into our time apart, I found myself scrolling through photos on my phone, old pictures of happier times. There was a shot of Sarah and me at the beach with the kids, all of us smiling, sunburned and carefree. Another picture from our anniversary dinner a couple of years ago, where we looked so in love, completely unaware of the storm that was coming. It felt like looking at someone else's life. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed advice, someone to talk to who could help me make sense of what I was feeling. I reached out to my best friend, Paul, who had been there for me through thick and thin. We met up for a drink, and as soon as I sat down, the weight of everything came pouring out. "I don't know what to do, man," I said, staring down at my beer. "I don't know if I can forgive her, but I also don't know if I'm ready to let go." Paul nodded, listening carefully. "You've been through a lot, Mike. No one would blame you if you decided to walk away. But you have to ask yourself, if you leave, are you going to be able to move on? Or are you going to regret not trying to fix things? That was the question that had been eating at me for weeks. Was I ready to let go of 10 years of marriage? Could I even imagine starting over? Or worse, watching her start over with someone else? I still love her, I admitted, my voice barely audible. But it feels different now. Like the love is there, but the trust is gone. Paul leaned back, thinking for a moment. Look, if you're not ready to make a decision, then don't. Give it more time. But you also can't live like this forever. At some point, you're going to have to decide whether you're all in or all out. His words hit me harder than I expected. I knew he was right. I couldn't keep drifting between forgiving her and resenting her. But the thought of making a final decision felt impossible. When I got home that night, Sarah was sitting on the couch, watching TV, but I could tell she hadn't really been watching it. She looked up at me as I walked in, her face a mix of hope and sadness. "Hey," she said softly, as if testing the waters. "Hey," I replied, sitting down across from her. We sat in silence for a while, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, she broke the tension. "Have you thought about what you want to do?" I sighed, rubbing my hands over my face. "I've been thinking about it nonstop, Sarah. I don't know. I'm stuck between wanting to try and fix this and wondering if it's even possible." Her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant. "I don't know either," she whispered. "But I don't want to lose you. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, whatever. I don't want to give up on us." Her words tugged at something deep inside me. I didn't want to give up either. But I also didn't want to be trapped in a marriage where I couldn't trust her. "I think we need to try counseling," I finally said, the words surprising even me. "If we're going to figure this out, we need help." She nodded quickly, wiping away a tear. "I'll do it. I'll set it up." And just like that, we had a plan, counseling. It wasn't a solution, but it was a step. Maybe the last step before we decided if this marriage was worth saving, or if it was time to move on. For now, we were still in limbo, but at least we were moving. A week later, we started counseling. I wasn't sure what to expect. Part of me hoped it would give us the tools to rebuild what we had, while another part worried it would just confirm that our marriage was beyond repair. But either way, I knew we had to try. The counselor, Dr. Roberts, was an older woman with a calm, steady presence. She made us feel comfortable right away, even though the tension between Sarah and me was palpable. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, like strangers instead of a married couple. But Dr. Roberts didn't seem surprised by that. I figured she'd seen worse. "So what brings you both here?" she asked, her tone gentle but direct. I hesitated, not knowing how to start, but Sarah spoke up first. I messed up," she said quietly, staring at her hands. "I had an affair and I hurt Mike. I don't know if he'll ever be able to forgive me, but I want to try and fix things." Hearing her admit it out loud, in front of someone else, was like a punch to the gut. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't say anything yet. I wanted to hear what Dr. Roberts had to say. Dr. Roberts nodded slowly, looking between the two of us. "It's good that you're here and that you're both willing to work on this. Affairs are incredibly painful, but healing is possible if both of you are committed to the process." She turned to me then, her eyes kind but serious. "Mike, how do you feel about being here? Do you want to work on the marriage, or are you feeling unsure?" I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm angry, hurt. I don't know if I can trust her again, but I also don't know if I'm ready to just walk away. We've been together for 10 years. I want to at least try to see if we can fix this." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, and for a moment I felt guilty. But I knew I had to be honest about how I was feeling. Dr. Roberts nodded, like she expected that answer. "That's understandable. Trust is the foundation of any marriage, and when it's broken, it can feel almost impossible to rebuild. But it can be rebuilt. It's going to take time, patience, and a lot of open communication." Over the next hour, we talked about everything. The affair, how Sarah had felt disconnected for a long time, and how I had been so focused on work and the kids that I didn't realize she was slipping away. I didn't agree with her reasons for cheating, but I started to understand the cracks in our relationship that had gone unnoticed for years. Dr. Roberts asked us both to be honest about our needs, not just now but what we needed from each other going forward. That was hard for me. I wasn't used to talking about my feelings. I'd always been the quiet fixer, the guy who kept everything together without asking for much in return. But now I was starting to see that maybe I had been too distant, too focused on doing everything myself instead of being present in our marriage. I need to know that you're committed to this, I finally said, looking at Sarah. If we're going to work on this, you can't just say you're sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. I need actions, not words. I need to see that you're all in. Sarah nodded quickly. I am, Mike. I swear. I know I hurt you, and I know I need to prove that I can be trusted again. I'll do whatever it takes. Hearing her say that helped, but it didn't erase the pain. I knew it would take a lot more than a few counseling sessions to heal the damage that had been done. By the end of the session, Dr. Roberts gave us some homework. She wanted us to start spending more time together without the kids and to really talk about our feelings, about what we wanted out of this marriage. It sounded simple, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. As we left the office, Sarah reached for my hand. I hesitated for a moment, but I took it. It was the first time we'd touched in weeks, and it felt strange, like we were starting over from scratch. But maybe that's what we needed, a fresh start. On the drive home, I felt a mix of emotions: hope, doubt, fear. Part of me was scared that counseling wouldn't be enough, that we'd still end up in the same place. But another part of me, maybe the part that still loved her, wanted to believe that we could get through this, that we could rebuild something new from the wreckage of our marriage. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe there was a chance. A small one, but a chance nonetheless. And for now, that was enough to keep going. After that first counseling session, things between Sarah and me started to shift. It wasn't a dramatic change, nothing like you'd see in movies, where everything magically gets better after one big heart-to-heart. No, this was more like a slow, painful crawl towards something that might eventually resemble progress. But it was progress, nonetheless. The first few days after counseling were awkward. Dr. Roberts had given us that homework, to spend time together and talk about our feelings, and neither of us really knew how to start. I think we were both afraid to be too vulnerable, afraid of saying the wrong thing and causing another argument. So, we started small. One evening, after the kids were in bed, we decided to go for a walk around the neighborhood. It was a simple thing, something we used to do all the time before everything fell apart. As we walked, the cool evening air seemed to loosen the tension between us, and we actually talked. Not about the affair, not about counseling, but about our day, the kids, and even some funny memories from years ago. It felt normal. For the first time in a while, it didn't feel like we were tiptoeing around each other. It wasn't exactly comfortable, but it wasn't as tense as before either. The next night, we decided to watch a movie together after the kids were asleep. I don't know if either of us really wanted to watch anything, but it was something to do. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, and then, about halfway through, Sarah shifted closer, resting her head on my shoulder. I froze for a moment, unsure of how to react, but then I relaxed and let it happen. It was such a small thing, but it felt huge. I couldn't remember the last time we'd been that physically close without the weight of everything hanging over us. It was a reminder of what used to be, of the intimacy we once shared before everything fell apart. But of course, it didn't last long before the doubts crept back in. After the movie ended and Sarah headed to bed, I found myself lying awake in the guest room, wondering if I was fooling myself. Could something as simple as spending time together really fix the damage that had been done? Was I just ignoring the bigger issues by focusing on these baby steps? The next day, we had another counseling session. This time it was harder. Dr. Roberts asked us to talk about trust, what it meant to us, and how we could rebuild it. That was tough for me. I had always trusted Sarah without question, and now, It felt like that foundation had been shattered. How do you think trust can be rebuilt? Dr. Roberts asked me, her voice calm and steady. I thought about it for a moment before answering. I guess I need consistency. I need to see that she's committed, that she's not going to do anything behind my back. I need honesty. No more secrets. No more lies. Sarah nodded, looking down at her hands. I understand that, she said softly. And I want to earn your trust back, Mike. I know it's going to take time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I wanted to believe her. Part of me did. But another part of me, the part that had been wounded by her betrayal, was still skeptical. Was she really committed, or was she just saying what she thought I wanted to hear? Dr. Roberts seemed to sense my hesitation. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight, she said gently. It's going to take time, and it's going to take both of you showing up for each other day after day. But the fact that you're both here, willing to work on it, is a good start. That night, Sarah and I talked more. This time it was about the hard stuff, the affair, how she had felt disconnected, and how I had missed the signs. I still didn't agree with her reasons for cheating, but I was starting to understand the distance that had grown between us long before Brandon entered the picture. It wasn't an easy conversation. At one point, she broke down, crying as she apologized again for the hurt she had caused. I didn't know what to say to comfort her, so I just sat there listening. I realized then that this process, this slow, painful rebuilding, wasn't just about me learning to trust her again. It was about both of us learning to be vulnerable with each other in a way we hadn't been for a long time. As the days went on, we kept taking those baby steps. More walks, more conversations, more little moments of connection. It wasn't perfect. Some days, I still felt distant, like I was holding back, afraid to fully let her back in. But there were also days when I felt like we were starting to find our way back to each other. I didn't know if we were going to make it in the long run. There was still so much healing that needed to happen, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever truly get over the betrayal. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope. Maybe we weren't as broken as I thought. After a few weeks of counseling and baby steps, things between us started to feel different. Not completely better, but more bearable. Sarah and I were talking more, and I could see she was making an effort, which gave me a sliver of hope. One night after we had put the kids to bed, Sarah sat down next to me on the couch, closer than usual. We had a moment of silence before she turned to me. I know I've said this before, but I'm really sorry, Mike, she said softly, her eyes searching mine. I know it's going to take time, but I'm not giving up on us. For the first time in a while, I didn't feel the immediate sting of anger or doubt. I nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. I'm not giving up either, I admitted. But this is still hard. I need to keep seeing you try every day. She nodded back, and for a moment, it felt like we were on the same page. It was a fragile moment of connection, but it was something. It was small, but sometimes small is enough. Just when I thought we were finally moving forward, we hit another setback. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Sarah was on her phone, texting someone. I didn't think much of it until I noticed the familiar look on her face, the same one she used to have when she was being secretive. My stomach dropped. "Who are you texting?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual, but I could feel the tension creeping in. Sarah froze for a moment, then quickly replied, "Oh, just one of the girls from the book club." A knot formed in my chest. The book club, the same excuse she'd used when she was sneaking around with Brandon. My mind started racing, old doubts rushing back. "Let me see," I said more sharply than I intended. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw the hesitation before she handed over the phone. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the messages, but it really was just her friend. No Brandon, no lies this time, but the damage was already done. I couldn't shake the doubt, and I hated that this was still happening. That trust still felt so fragile. I handed her phone back, trying to swallow the frustration building inside me. Sarah must have sensed it. She looked at me with tears forming in her eyes. "I swear, Mike, I'm not hiding anything," she whispered. "I'm trying." I know I messed up before, but I'm doing everything I can to prove it to you. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But moments like this reminded me just how hard it was to let go of the past. I know, I said quietly. I'm trying too, but it's not easy. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I understand. The moment passed, but the setback lingered. Even when everything seemed okay, the shadow of what had happened was still there, hanging over us. We were both trying, but some days, it felt like we were taking one step forward and two steps back. A few days after that setback, things were still tense. The unspoken weight of our issues was hanging between us, and it felt like we were slipping back into old patterns, me withdrawing, Sarah trying to hold it all together. I knew we couldn't keep going like this, so I decided it was time to really talk. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat down at the kitchen table and called Sarah over. She looked nervous, like she could sense something heavy was coming. I think we need to talk about everything, really talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She sat down across from me, biting her lip. Oh, okay. I took a deep breath. I don't want to keep going through the motions, acting like we're fine when we're not. I need to know where we're really at. Do you still want to fix this? Or are we just holding on to something that's already gone? She looked down for a moment, then back at me, her eyes full of emotion. I do want to fix this, Mike. I know I've hurt you, and I know it's hard, but I love you, and I don't want to lose our family. I'm all in, I promise. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I could see she was sincere, but I also knew words alone wouldn't be enough. I believe you, I said quietly. But trust, it doesn't just come back overnight. I need time, and I need to see you keep trying. I will, she said, reaching for my hand. I'll keep trying, no matter how long it takes. We sat there for a moment, just holding hands, neither of us saying anything. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the most honest conversation we'd had in a while. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe we were finally on the same page. It wasn't going to be easy. There would still be setbacks, still moments of doubt. But at least now we were facing it together. After that conversation, something shifted between us. It wasn't like everything was magically fixed, but the air between us felt lighter, less weighed down by all the things we hadn't said. We were finally being honest about our pain, our fears, and the possibility that things might still fall apart. But we were both willing to keep trying, and that was more than I had felt in a long time. The next weekend, we took the kids to the park. It was a simple outing, nothing special, but it felt different. Sarah and I weren't walking on eggshells like we had been for so long. We laughed together as we watched the kids play, and for the first time in months, it felt like we were a team again. Later that night, after we put the kids to bed, she suggested we sit outside on the porch, something we used to do back when things were simpler. We didn't talk about anything heavy. We just sat together, sipping tea and watching the sunset. As the evening grew quieter, Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder, and I didn't pull away. Instead, I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a step towards something better, something that maybe we could rebuild, even after all the hurt. It wasn't perfect, and I knew it wouldn't be for a long time. But sitting there with her, in that quiet moment, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. For now, that was enough.